Imagine this, a world orbiting a distant star 120 light years away, where oceans may shimmer beneath alien skies, where air may whisper through forests that have never known a human breath. James Webb Space Telescope has just found a planet with a 99.7% chance of life, and this discovery may shatter everything we thought we knew about being alone in the universe. This isn't just science, it's history unfolding before our eyes. If you believe humanity was meant to explore, to discover, to reach beyond the stars, then subscribe, like, and turn on the bell icon, because what Webb is revealing next will redefine our place in the cosmos forever. When the James Webb Space Telescope first unfurled its golden mirrors in the silent vacuum of space, few could have imagined that within just a few short years, it would uncover something that could alter the course of human history. For centuries, our species had searched for life beyond Earth, peering into the darkness of the cosmos, listening for whispers, waiting for proof. Philosophers debated it, scientists dreamed of it, poets romanticized it, but in the early days of exploration, that question, "Are we alone?" remained the one mystery the stars refused to answer. Until now, the story begins not in a grand control room or a cinematic moment of revelation, but in the quiet data stream of a telescope orbiting a million miles from home. Webb was never built to find aliens. It was built to see light, ancient, delicate, stretched thin across billions of years. But in that light lies everything: the fingerprints of atoms, the glow of distant stars, and sometimes, if the universe allows, the unmistakable trace of life itself. One of Webb's observing campaigns was directed at a small, relatively dim star catalogued as HD 63433, roughly 120 light years away in the constellation of Leo. There was nothing remarkable about it until its light dimmed, periodically and predictably, as a planet crossed in front of it. That planet would soon earn a name that echoed through scientific halls and social media alike: Eden 9b. When astronomers first noticed the dips in brightness, they assumed it was another super-Earth or mini-Neptune, one of the thousands we've already catalogued. But the initial spectroscopic data caught their attention. Something about the atmosphere's chemical makeup looked off, too balanced, too familiar. In a world dominated by raw physics and chance chemistry, perfect balance rarely occurs, and yet the light passing through Eden 9b's atmosphere told a different story. When Webb's infrared spectrometer broke that light into its components, the absorption lines, the dark fingerprints where gases absorb starlight, painted a picture no one expected to see. Methane, oxygen, water vapor, carbon dioxide, not in random quantities, but in a precise equilibrium that mirrored the atmospheric chemistry of a living world. On Earth, such a combination cannot exist for long without life constantly replenishing it. Oxygen and methane destroy each other in the atmosphere. Their coexistence requires active biological cycling. That's why our own planet's air is so extraordinary, because it breathes. So when scientists saw those same patterns in the light from Eden 9b, something inside them shifted. They weren't just looking at another rock orbiting another star. They were looking at a possibility, a reflection of Earthlight traveling from a world alive with its own story. At first, skepticism reigned. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence, and no one wanted to be the one who cried life too soon. The data went through layer after layer of analysis. Teams from NASA, ESA, and CSA Cross verified every spectrum, ruled out contamination, ran models to test for false positives, volcanic gases, photochemical reactions, even artificial interference. But every scenario failed to explain the data without invoking biology. It wasn't proof, but it was something just as powerful: probability. When the Bayesian statistical model finally converged, the result flashed across the screen: 99.7% probability that the detected atmospheric balance was due to biological processes. The number froze the room. 99.7. It was the kind of figure that makes the heart skip. Not a coin toss, not a dream, almost certainty, almost life. The scientists present, veterans hardened by decades of skepticism, fell silent. Some smiled, some cried, others simply stared, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what they were witnessing. A few whispered words that would echo far beyond that lab. We found it. News spread quietly at first. Within NASA, only a small group of researchers and administrators were briefed. They understood the gravity of what they might be holding in their hands, a discovery that could rewrite biology, religion, and philosophy in a single breath. Protocol demanded caution, peer review, verification, duplication. They reached out to the European Southern Observatory, to the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, and to Japan's Subaru Telescope. Independent teams reanalyzed Webb's light curves, recalibrated for cosmic noise, atmospheric interference, and instrumental drift. Yet every model, every recalculation, led to the same stunning conclusion. As the evidence mounted, the world began to sense something extraordinary was coming. Rumors leaked, whispers filled online forums, news outlets, and academic circles. Webb found something, they said. Something big, and then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, NASA made the announcement that would electrify humanity. The administrator stood before a sea of cameras, her voice steady but charged with awe. Today, she said, we announce the most compelling evidence yet that we are not alone. The James Webb Space Telescope has detected strong biosignatures, indicators of life, on a planet orbiting a distant star. Its name is Eden 9b. The words rippled through the world like thunder. Cities paused. Children looked up from their classrooms. Newsrooms fell silent, then erupted in disbelief. The stock market dipped, then soared. Social media exploded with hashtags, speculation, and wonder. For the first time in human history, we were not talking about life as an idea or a hope, but as a measurable, statistical near certainty. 99.7%. Scientists around the globe scrambled to interpret the data. Some argued for caution, reminding the world that biology is complex and nature loves to mimic life. Others embraced the moment, calling it the dawn of a new age. Religious leaders issued statements of awe and humility. Philosophers debated what it meant to be unique in a universe teeming with creation. The Vatican released a simple, poetic response. If the Creator is infinite, then creation must be infinite too. Meanwhile, deep in the data labs of the Space Telescope Science Institute, the team that had discovered the signal worked around the clock. They refined atmospheric models, simulated planetary climates, and ran spectral comparisons. What they found made Eden 9b even more astonishing. The planet wasn't a scorching hell like Venus, nor a frozen wasteland like Mars. It orbited its star within the habitable zone, where liquid water could exist on its surface. Its atmosphere showed evidence of haze and clouds, possibly water-based. Surface temperature estimates hovered between 12 and 25 degrees Celsius, almost perfect by Earth standards. It was quite literally another Earth, but older, perhaps wiser, shaped by different hands. The press began calling it the second Earth, though scientists preferred Eden 9b. The ninth known exoplanet in its system, and the one that carried the greatest promise. Within weeks, documentaries were greenlit. Theaters and streaming platforms prepared specials titled Webb's Living World, and the planet that changed everything. The public's imagination ignited. Paintings, songs, novels, and digital art filled the internet. Humanity had always dreamed of heaven beyond the stars, and now for the first time we had coordinates. In classrooms across the globe, teachers used Eden 9b to explain spectroscopy, chemistry, and the concept of light years. Children stared at artists' impressions of green, blue worlds and asked if we could ever visit. Astronomers smiled sadly. 120 light years was far beyond our reach, at least for now. But they reminded the world that light itself was a messenger. traveling across centuries just to deliver the news that we were not alone. Behind the scenes, Webb continued to collect more data. Observations in multiple wavelengths revealed seasonal patterns in the planet's atmosphere, fluctuations that hinted at photosynthesis or cyclical biological activity. When compared with Earth's biosphere, the similarities were uncanny. The ratio of gases resembled those of our own planet roughly a billion years ago, during the early oxygenation era, a time when microbial life dominated our oceans and skies. That clue changed everything. Eden 9b might not just be alive. It might be a living time capsule, showing us what our own world looked like in its early stages of biological evolution. The thought humbled even the most stoic scientists. It wasn't just that life existed elsewhere. It was that we could now study life's pattern, its rhythm, across time and space. Biology was no longer Earth's secret. It was a universal song, written in chemistry and sung by the stars. The implications rippled outward into every field of human thought. Astrobiology shifted from a niche curiosity to the new frontier of science. Planetary missions were redesigned to focus on atmospheric biosignatures. Funding for life detection technologies skyrocketed. Suddenly, humanity's gaze was not fixed on Mars or Europa, but on the stars themselves. In the months that followed, the discovery united people in ways rarely seen in modern times. The boundaries that had divided nations seemed to fade, if only for a while, under the shared awe of cosmic kinship. Television networks aired synchronized broadcasts of Webb's imagery. In New York, thousands gathered in Times Square to watch NAS as live data stream projected on giant screens. When the image of Eden 9b, soft blue and gray, cloaked in mist, appeared, the crowd erupted in applause. In Paris, bells rang from churches. In Islamabad, prayers of wonder rose from mosques. In Tokyo, crowds gathered around observatories to gaze at the patch of sky where Eden 9b orbited. For one brief, breathtaking moment, humanity was united by curiosity, not conflict. The James Webb Space Telescope had not only discovered a planet, it had awakened something ancient within us, the longing to connect, to understand, to belong. For generations, we had seen ourselves as solitary wanderers in an empty universe, but Eden 9b shattered that illusion. Life was not the exception, it was the rule waiting to be noticed, and in that realization came both humility and hope. As weeks turned to months, scientists began proposing theories about the nature of Eden 9b's life. Some suggested a biosphere dominated by photosynthetic organisms, perhaps microbial mats or algal oceans covering vast swaths of the planet. Others speculated about multicellular forms, perhaps even intelligent life, though most dismissed that as premature. Still, the imagination could not be contained. What if, somewhere beneath that alien sky, creatures were gazing back? What if they had their own myths about the stars, their own questions about existence, unaware that on a distant blue dot, another species had just discovered them? Webb, of course, could not answer those questions. Its instruments were powerful, but limited to spectra and light. Yet even in that limitation lay beauty. Light, after all, is history. Every photon captured by Webb had traveled 120 years through the void, carrying with it the story of a living world. That meant that while we were watching the dawn of the 20th century on Earth, while humanity was inventing airplanes and electricity and dreaming of the stars, Eden 9b was already alive, breathing under the light of its sun. And perhaps, as those photons began their journey toward us, something on that world looked up at its own sky, wondering the same thing we had wondered for so long: are we alone? The symmetry of that thought, that two civilizations might be staring at the same universe, separated by space and time yet connected by curiosity, is what moved so many to tears. Because in the end, the discovery wasn't just about science, it was about meaning. When people looked at the data, they didn't just see numbers and graphs. They saw themselves reflected in the universe. They saw the persistence of life, the endurance of creation, and the boundless potential of existence. Eden 9b became more than a world. It became a symbol, a mirror held up to humanity, reminding us that life, in all its mystery, refuses to be confined to one world. The James Webb Space Telescope had fulfilled its destiny in a way no one predicted. Built to see the dawn of time, it had instead seen the dawn of a new truth. Somewhere out there a planet breathes. Somewhere out there life goes on, unaware of us but bound to us by the same cosmic laws. And in that realization, every human heart felt something awaken, a quiet understanding that we are not the center of creation, but participants in it. And as Webb continues to orbit, its golden mirrors catching light older than civilization, we know this is only the beginning. Because if there is one Eden, there must be others. And with every beam of light, with every photon captured, we inch closer to finding them, not as conquerors, not as explorers, but as family in a vast, living cosmos. Under the black silence of space, a mirror the size of a tennis court drifts, its hexagonal panels glinting like drops of sunlight frozen in gold. The James Webb Space Telescope, Webb, as the world lovingly calls it, was born out of a dream and a dare. Humanity dared to build a machine capable of seeing what no eye had ever seen before, to stretch its sight across billions of years, to watch the universe as it was at the moment of its awakening. Yet in chasing the light of creation, Webb found something far closer, something that would pierce the soul of our species. It found a living world, or so the evidence whispered through photons older than any human memory. To understand what Webb saw, you must first imagine what it means to see across light. Years. The light from a distant planet is unimaginably faint, drowned in the brilliance of its star. It's like trying to spot the glimmer of a firefly hovering next to a lighthouse from thousands of miles away. Yet Webb was designed for this impossible task. Its 6.5-meter primary mirror, crafted from beryllium and coated in pure gold, collects the faintest threads of infrared radiation, the kind of light that can slip through cosmic dust and carry fingerprints of molecules across the universe. When Eden 9b passed in front of its parent star, some of that starlight filtered through the planet's atmosphere before reaching Webb. In that brief moment, a story was written in light, a chemical symphony encoded in absorption lines and wavelengths invisible to human eyes. Webb spectrometers, tuned to the subtle infrared regions, captured that story. Each dip in brightness corresponded to a molecule: oxygen, methane, water vapor, carbon dioxide. Every line told a tale of interaction between sunlight and air, between chemistry and the possibility of biology. The beauty of Webb's design lies not only in its sensitivity, but in its precision. Unlike its predecessor, the Hubble Space Telescope, which observed primarily invisible and ultraviolet light, Webb sees heat itself, the infrared glow of worlds. This ability allows it to look into dusty stellar nurseries, to watch the birth of stars and the formation of planets. But when turned toward Eden 9b, it performed something akin to alchemy. It transformed invisible radiation into information, transforming that information into knowledge, and that knowledge into wonder. It took months of calibration for Webb's instruments to reach this level of perfection. Engineers adjusted each mirror segment down to nanometers, aligning them until the starlight converged into a single, flawless point. Behind every image Webb captures lies decades of innovation: cryogenic cooling systems that keep it near absolute zero, shielding layers as thin as a human hair but wider than a house, computers that process data through cosmic radiation and solar wind. All this technology, all this ingenuity, for one purpose: to collect light. Because in light there is truth. When Webb collected the light from Eden 9b, it was more than just data. It was time itself, traveling 120 years to reach us. Those photons left their home world when humanity was still writing with ink pens and riding horses. They crossed interstellar space, slipped through magnetic fields, brushed against dust clouds, and finally entered Webb's golden eye. There they were captured, separated, and studied by humans who had not yet existed when they began their journey. It's hard to imagine anything more poetic than that. Inside NASA's data center, the first processed spectra from Eden 9b appeared on a screen, a series of colored lines, peaks, and valleys. To the untrained eye, it looked like random noise, but to the scientists who had spent their lives reading light, it was a revelation. Each valley was a voice, each peak a heartbeat. The distinctive signature of oxygen appeared first, followed by methane. Alone, each could have been explained by none: biological processes, volcanic activity, photochemistry, or thermal dissociation. But together, in perfect balance, they told a story that defied randomness. That was the moment Webb transcended its role as a machine. It became a storyteller relaying a message written in wavelengths. It said, "There is chemistry here, there is order, there is breath." The most extraordinary thing about Webb's discovery was not that it saw these molecules, but that it saw them so clearly, so confidently, across the void. No telescope before it could have done this. Even Hubble's greatest exoplanet observations barely hinted at atmospheric components. Webb, however, saw the invisible. Its detectors, cooled to minus 233 degrees C, could sense the faint warmth of a molecule spinning in an alien sky. Its instruments didn't just observe a planet, they dissected it. They peeled away the glare of the star, separated the light that passed through the planet's atmosphere, and extracted meaning from it. Behind every spectral line lies an equation, a calculation of energy, frequency, and probability. Scientists at the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore spent weeks translating those patterns into actual gases. They built models of possible atmospheres, varying temperature, pressure, and chemical abundance until the simulated spectra matched Webb's observations. When they did, what emerged was stunning. Eden 9b's air resembled a self-regulating system, rich in reactive gases that could only coexist through constant renewal, something life on Earth does effortlessly. Methane and oxygen are mortal enemies. They react with one another, breaking down into carbon dioxide and water. On a lifeless planet, one would dominate, erasing the other. Yet on Eden 9b, both persisted. The only reasonable explanation was that something, perhaps microorganisms, perhaps something beyond our imagination, was maintaining that balance. Webb had not imaged continents or creatures, but it had seen their fingerprints. Every photon from Eden 9b carried a secret, and Webb's instruments were fluent in the language of light. To decode that language, astronomers turned to transmission spectroscopy, the art of reading a planet's atmosphere as it filters starlight. During each transit, the light curves dipped slightly, signaling the presence of gases absorbing specific wavelengths. Webb's near-infrared spectrograph, NIRSpec, and mid-infrared instrument MIRI worked in tandem to capture that absorption with unparalleled accuracy. These tools transformed faint fluctuations into hard data, allowing researchers to measure atmospheric depth, composition, and temperature. Imagine the precision required, detecting the atmospheric composition of a planet that, from our vantage point, is smaller than a pixel. Webb's vision operates on the scale of photons, distinguishing between wavelengths differing by mere trillionths of a meter. It's the astronomical equivalent of hearing a whisper across an ocean. Yet Webb didn't just hear it, it recorded every syllable, every nuance, and every resonance. The data analysis took months, and during that time, the team operated in near secrecy. They knew the implications of what they were seeing. A miscalculation could spark global misinformation, A confirmed detection could change humanity's place in the cosmos. So they checked and rechecked, ran simulations, accounted for cosmic noise and instrument bias, even compared their data with other telescopes. The result remained unchanged. The chemical ratios on Eden 9b were not random, they were structured, intentional almost. Some called it the cosmic Rosetta Stone, a translation key between chemistry and life. Others saw it as a sign of cosmic inevitability, proof that given the right conditions, life will always emerge, no matter the planet, no matter the star. For the scientists, it was both a triumph and a burden, the triumph of human ingenuity, the burden of knowing what this discovery meant. Humanity's centuries-long isolation had ended, and all of it came down to a telescope drifting 1,000,000 miles away, powered by solar light and human hope. Webb's sunshield, the size of a tennis court, kept it cool enough to see the invisible. Its mirrors, gold, because gold reflects infrared, perfectly gleamed with purpose. Every photon that hit those mirrors was guided down a tunnel of precision, bouncing off surfaces smoother than any mirror on Earth. Each reflection refined the signal, focused it, sharpened it until truth emerged. The technology behind this miracle is as breathtaking as the discovery itself. Webb's infrared sensitivity allows it to detect temperature variations smaller than a fraction of a degree. Its spectrometers can separate light into over 200 zeros, zero channels, each corresponding to a molecular fingerprint. And because Webb is stationed at the second Lagrange point L2, where Earth and Sun's gravitational forces balance perfectly, it enjoys a stable environment free of interference. There it orbits in eternal twilight, its gaze unblinking. When scientists processed the full dataset from Eden 9b, they also detected hints of other compounds, possibly nitrous oxide, even trace chlorofluorocarbons. These were tentative findings, still under review, but if confirmed, they would suggest industrial chemistry or microbial metabolism. Webb had, in essence, opened a window into another biosphere. For the first time, we weren't speculating about life out there, we were measuring it. But beyond the numbers and the data, there was a quiet, spiritual wonder that swept through the scientific community. Here was a machine born of human hands, reaching into the infinite, collecting whispers from a planet 120 years away, and telling us that we are not alone. It was as if the universe had been waiting for us to build something capable of listening, and when we finally did, it spoke. In control rooms and offices around the world, scientists stared at the spectra, overwhelmed not by the complexity, but by the simplicity of what they saw. Light in all its purity had revealed the oldest truth of all, that life finds a way. Webb had captured not just data, but destiny. And perhaps the most haunting thought of all is this: somewhere on that distant world, the same light that left their skies is now illuminating ours. For every photon that traveled from Eden 9b to Webb, another might have been reflected back toward them, carrying our story, our chemistry, our breath. Maybe, just maybe, they too have their own telescope, peering into their night, detecting a faint, pale dot orbiting a yellow star. Maybe they too are asking, are we alone? And perhaps, across 120 light years of darkness, the universe has already begun to answer for both of us. This is the power of Webb's vision. It's not just about seeing deeper or farther, it's about seeing truth in the subtlest forms of light. It's about turning silence into dialogue, darkness into discovery. When it captured the spectra of Eden 9b, it didn't just see a planet, it saw connection. It proved that the faintest whisper of a molecule can become a message to an entire civilization. The James Webb Space Telescope is not a machine of metal and mirrors. It is a bridge between light and understanding, between isolation and belonging. And through that bridge, we now see what we could not before, that the universe is alive, patient, and waiting to be known. Webb found more than a world that might harbor life. It found proof that light itself is the voice of the cosmos, and that when we learn to listen carefully enough, we will hear not just echoes of creation, but the quiet murmur of companionship, written in the language of the stars. For as long as human beings have walked beneath the sky, we've looked up and wondered if we were alone. It is one of those questions that burns quietly in every soul, a curiosity too vast to silence. Ancient civilizations wrote myths about gods descending from the heavens. Philosophers debated whether the stars were suns with their own worlds. Astronomers risked ridicule and excommunication for daring to suggest that Earth was not the center of everything. And now, centuries later, that same hunger to know has led us to this moment, to a machine a million miles away that has given us an answer not in words, but in light. For the first time in all of history, we have statistical proof that another world may live and breathe beneath a foreign sun. The James Webb Space Telescope has found a planet with a 99.7% chance of life. When that number was announced, humanity paused. It was as if the entire species took one collective breath, suspended between disbelief and awe. The scientists who made the discovery tried to remain calm, explaining the data, the chemical signatures, the precision of their analysis. But beneath the language of science, something ancient stirred, a feeling as old as fire, as primal as wonder, the realization that the universe might be teeming with life, that our story is not a lonely anomaly, but one verse in a vast cosmic symphony. For millennia, we have asked the question, are we alone? In prayers, poems, and radio signals hurled into the dark. We search the skies not only with telescopes, but with our hearts, hoping to find some reflection of ourselves in the stars. And now that hope has been answered not by myth or miracle, but by mathematics and light, a 99.7% probability. It sounds clinical, yet behind that number is the collective dream of generations. Behind it are the nights Galileo spent peering through his crude telescope, the theories of Giordano Bruno, who died for believing in infinite worlds, the sleepless hours of Carl Sagan whispering that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This is that evidence. When the announcement went public, the world changed in ways no one could have fully predicted. News outlets ran the story on loop, but it wasn't the usual frenzy of speculation, it was reverence. Scientists appeared on television, their voices trembling as they tried to convey what this meant, that life, in some form, likely exists beyond Earth. Children in classrooms stared at holographic projections of Eden 9b, their imaginations igniting with possibilities. Parents found themselves struggling to explain how something so far away could feel so close, how a planet we will never touch could make us feel more connected than ever before. For the first time, belief and science walked hand in hand. Religions across the globe released statements of humility, not fear. The Vatican's message was simple: the heavens declare the glory of creation, and creation has no boundaries. Islamic scholars quoted verses that speak of countless worlds and signs in the heavens. Hindu philosophers compared the discovery to the eternal cycles of creation described in ancient texts. Even those who had no religion felt something deeply spiritual, not because it challenged faith, but because it expanded it. The discovery didn't make us smaller, it made the universe feel alive. Imagine for a moment what this means. For thousands of years, humanity's self-perception has swung between two extremes, cosmic arrogance and cosmic loneliness. We once believed the universe revolved around us, and when science proved otherwise, we overcorrected into despair, believing ourselves insignificant, accidental, irrelevant. But now, Webb's discovery offers a new story, that life is not a fluke, not a solitary miracle confined to one fragile world, but an intrinsic part of the universe itself. Life may be as natural to existence as gravity or starlight. That realization reshapes everything we think we know about what it means to be alive. In universities, students began switching their majors to astrobiology, astronomy, chemistry, even philosophy. The search for life was no longer just science, it was identity. A surge of global cooperation followed. Nations that had long competed in space exploration began sharing data, pooling resources, and planning joint missions. Humanity, so often divided by language and politics, found itself united by curiosity. We stopped arguing about who owned the stars and started asking what it meant to be part of them. And yet, beneath the excitement, there was also a quiet unease. The more we considered the implications, the more profound the questions became. If life exists elsewhere, what form does it take? Are they microbes drifting in alien oceans, or intelligent beings capable of thought and emotion? If they are intelligent, have they too asked the same question, are we alone, and wondered if someone, somewhere, was asking it too? The thought that two civilizations could exist, separated by 120 light years, each staring into the same universe, each unknowingly searching for the other, is enough to humble even the proudest mind. Somewhere on that distant planet, under the light of a foreign sun, there might be an ocean teeming with microscopic life. Perhaps in that alien sea, currents move in rhythms that resemble our tides. Perhaps storms flash across its skies, and beneath them, something stirs, something that breathes, feeds, and multiplies. And perhaps if that world has eyes that can look upward, its creatures have wondered about us too, about the faint, pale star that shines in their night. The discovery forced us to reconsider our definition of life. For so long, we defined it through the narrow lens of our biology, DNA, carbon, oxygen, water. But Eden 9b might not play by Earth's rules. Its atmosphere, while similar to ours in chemical balance, could nurture forms of life that are utterly alien to our understanding. They might not have cells or genes as we know them. They might not breathe air. They might think, if they think at all, in ways that have no parallel to human thought. And yet, they are alive. This realization, this expansion of what life can mean began to seep into art, literature, and culture. Painters depicted glowing oceans filled with bioluminescent beings. Poets wrote verses about shared skies and twin worlds. Musicians composed symphonies that wove together the frequencies of Webb's data with human voices, turning science into song. For once, art and science were not in opposition. They were reflections of the same truth, two different languages trying to express the same cosmic wonder. On social media, millions shared images of the planet. The phrase, "we are not alone," trended for weeks, not as a warning, but as a celebration. For people burdened by loneliness, the thought of another living world offered comfort. For those crushed by the vastness of the universe, it offered companionship. For dreamers, it offered purpose. Humanity had found a mirror, not one that showed our flaws, but one that showed our potential. Governments and institutions scrambled to keep up with the public's imagination. Space agencies began drafting long-term missions aimed at studying Eden 9b more closely. There were proposals for massive interferometer arrays in lunar orbit, capable of imaging exoplanet surfaces with unprecedented detail. Others suggested sending a probe propelled by solar sails, using laser beams to accelerate it to a fraction of light speed. It would take centuries to arrive, but for the first time, humanity was planning on cosmic timescales. The idea that we might one day see that world up close was no longer fantasy, it was destiny. Philosophers called it the Second Copernican Revolution. The first had displaced Earth from the center of the cosmos. The second displaced humans from the center of life. We were no longer the sole expression of biology. We were part of a universal continuum. The universe wasn't a cold, sterile expanse. It was fertile ground, a garden of worlds. Some scientists began referring to this new world view as biocosmism, the belief that life is not an anomaly but the fundamental nature of existence. In the months after the discovery, people began to change in subtle ways. Crime rates dipped in some cities. Charitable donations to global causes increased. Communities held cosmic nights, where people gathered outdoors to look at the stars, not in competition, but in communion. The sense of smallness that once terrified us began to feel sacred. The more we realized how vast the universe was, the more we realized how precious every form of life must be here or elsewhere. Yet amid all the celebration, the scientific community remained cautious. They knew how fragile such discoveries could be. Data can be misinterpreted, probabilities can be miscalculated. They continued to test and retest the findings, searching for alternate explanations. But the deeper they looked, the more the evidence held. The spectral lines were real. The balance of gases was real. The conclusion, though astonishing, was unavoidable. Eden 9b's atmosphere bore the unmistakable fingerprints of life. It's strange how a single discovery can alter not only our understanding of the universe, but our understanding of ourselves. Before Webb, humanity often saw itself as isolated, trapped on a small blue dot in an infinite void. But after Webb, we began to see ourselves as part of a much larger narrative. The loneliness that haunted our species for centuries began to lift, replaced by a quiet sense of belonging. Even if we never meet the inhabitants of Eden 9b, even if we never exchange words or signals, the knowledge that they exist changes everything. The question, are we alone, has always been as much emotional as it is scientific. It's not just about biology, it's about connection, meaning, and purpose. To know that life exists elsewhere is to know that the universe is capable of love, growth, and persistence beyond our imagination. It tells us that creation is not something that happened once, but something that keeps happening everywhere, always. In time, the discovery of Eden 9b came to symbolize something deeper than the existence of aliens. It became a metaphor for hope. Hope that we are not isolated accidents. Hope that the universe is generous with life. Hope that one day, when we are wiser, kinder, and more united, we might reach out and find friends among the stars. Late at night, people began looking at the sky differently. The stars no longer felt like unreachable points of light. They felt like neighbors' windows, glowing softly in the dark. Children began drawing not just rockets and astronauts, but other planets filled with life. For them, space was no longer a void, it was home extended. Perhaps the greatest legacy of Webb's discovery is not the data, not the statistics, not even the science. It's the transformation of human consciousness. We no longer gaze at the cosmos as spectators, we look as participants in a living universe. The 99.7% chance of life is not just a number, it's an invitation to wonder, to explore, to connect. It tells us that we belong to something infinite, something enduring, something that transcends the smallness of our fears. And so, as Webb continues its vigil in the dark, collecting light older than our civilization, we carry that awareness with us. We are not alone, we never were. Life, it seems, is the universe's way of knowing itself. And in discovering Eden 9b, we have not just found another planet. We have found a reflection of our own longing, our own courage, our own cosmic destiny. The question that haunted us for millennia has finally found its answer, not in words but in light. And that answer, whispered through the endless night, is simple, beautiful, and eternal. We are part of a living universe. Imagine standing before a vast mirror, one so immense that it reflects not only your image but the very essence of what you are, what you've been, and what you might become. That's what Eden 9b represents for humanity. It isn't just a planet orbiting some distant sun. It's a reflection of us, of our story, of the fragile and improbable phenomenon we call life. When the James Webb Space Telescope captured the spectral signature of this world, a combination of gases so balanced, so precisely tuned to the chemistry of life, it wasn't only data we were seeing. It was a reflection of Earth mirrored across light years, and in that reflection we saw something profound, that life is not a cosmic accident, but a cosmic pattern. When the data first arrived, many scientists were cautious. They spoke in careful tones, measured in probabilities and uncertainties. But when they examined the atmospheric composition of Eden 9b, its oxygen, methane, water vapor, and traces of nitrogen, they realized it wasn't just coincidence. It was equilibrium, a living balance almost identical to the one that sustains us here. And in that moment, the telescope ceased being a machine of observation and became something more, a bridge across the void, connecting one living world to another. It's hard to overstate what that realization did to the human spirit. For the first time, the cosmos didn't feel silent. It felt alive, breathing softly across the dark. Eden 9b became a mirror in the deepest sense, not only showing us that life can exist elsewhere, but that the very conditions that make us possible are not confined to our planet. It showed us that life might be the universe's default setting, not its rare exception. On Earth, our history has been defined by separation nation from nation, species from species, even man from nature. But the discovery of Eden 9b began to erode those boundaries. It reminded us that the same chemical patterns that animate us also pulse through the stars, through the atmospheres of far-off worlds, through the molecular breath of the cosmos itself. The carbon in our bodies was forged in stellar furnaces. The water that sustains us was born in interstellar clouds. And now that same cosmic chemistry seems to have blossomed elsewhere in the same delicate balance. The mirror showed us that we are not isolated flukes. We are expressions of a universal language. People began to see the Earth differently. What once felt like a lonely blue marble floating in endless darkness now seemed like one planet among many, part of a great cosmic garden. Photographers started calling their new works reflections of Eden. Poets wrote of twin worlds whispering across light, years, of two biospheres breathing in rhythm. The idea that another planet could share our atmospheric song touched something deep in the collective imagination. It felt as if the universe had been waiting for us to look long enough, to listen carefully enough, to realize that we were never truly alone. But beyond the wonder, there was something more intimate, something personal. The discovery of Eden 9b forced humanity to confront its own reflection, not only scientifically, but morally and emotionally. When we saw that life might thrive elsewhere, we were forced to ask, what does it mean to be alive here? We began to see our planet not as property to be exploited, but as a living being kin to another across the stars. The mirror didn't just show us another world, it showed us who we were becoming. For centuries, humans have measured greatness by conquest, by how far we can go, what we can control, what we can claim. But in the light of Eden 9b, all that began to feel small. For once, the measure of our civilization wasn't what we could take, but what we could understand. We realized that to truly explore the cosmos, we would have to evolve not only technologically, but spiritually. Because, if there is life out there, if there are other beings under that alien sun, then we must meet them not as conquerors, but as kin. Eden 9b became a kind of cosmic teacher. It reminded us that life, in all its forms, is fragile yet relentless. It adapts, it endures, it finds a way to bloom even in the harshest environments. The discovery made scientists reconsider the origin of life itself. Perhaps, they proposed, life doesn't simply emerge from chemistry, it is written into the very laws of physics, a natural consequence of matter-seeking complexity. If so, then the universe doesn't merely permit life, it wants it. Every atom, every photon, every gravitational curve becomes part of a grand design that favors awareness, growth, consciousness. This idea that life is not an accident but a principle began to ripple beyond science. Theologians embraced it as evidence of divine intentionality. Philosophers saw it as proof that the universe has meaning woven into its fabric. Artists depicted it as a cosmic heartbeat connecting all creation. Even skeptics, though cautious, admitted a quiet awe that from chaos could come order so elegant, so purposeful, that it almost feels like destiny. But the mirror doesn't only reflect beauty, it reflects imperfection too. Seeing another living world forced us to look at our own failings. The pollution in our atmosphere, the dying oceans, the extinction of countless species, all became harder to justify. How could we celebrate discovering another habitable world while destroying the one that gave us life? The contrast was sharp. On one side, Eden 9b, a planet alive and balanced; on the other, Earth, wounded but still fighting. The reflection became a warning as much as a wonder. Take care of what you are, or you may not deserve what you find. Environmental movements drew new energy from this revelation. Protect our mirror became a rallying cry. The notion that somewhere out there a sister world was thriving under alien skies reminded people that Earth was not expendable, it was sacred. Space exploration and ecological preservation, once seen as opposing priorities, began to merge into a single philosophy. To explore outward, we must first learn to preserve inward. Scientists, too, found inspiration in the mirror. Studying Eden 9b's atmospheric data, they saw echoes of Earth's early evolution, an atmosphere in flux, rich with potential, teetering between stability and chaos. It was like peering back in time, seeing our own planet's youth reflected in distant light. Every data point became a clue not only about that world, but about our own origins. We realized that understanding them might help us understand ourselves. The story of Eden 9b became deeply human. It spoke to our longing for connection, our instinct to search for meaning in the vastness. We have always sought mirrors, through art, through philosophy, through each other. And now, at the edge of the cosmos, we found one made of rock and sky and chemistry. It made us feel less alone, but it also made us accountable. Because if life can emerge twice, it can emerge countless times. And that means we are part of a living network that extends beyond anything we can imagine. Some wondered whether those other life forms might look anything like us. The truth is, they probably don't. They might not have eyes or limbs or even solid bodies, but in the ways that matter most, in their drive to survive, to adapt, to evolve, they are our reflections. They are born of the same universal hunger to persist. In that sense, life itself is the greatest mirror of all, showing us that existence is a shared language spoken in infinite dialects. This understanding began to shift the tone of human ambition. Space was no longer a frontier to be conquered, but a community to be joined. Exploration became an act of humility rather than dominance. The cosmos stopped being out there and started feeling like home. And with that realization came a new kind of courage, the courage to see ourselves honestly, to acknowledge both our brilliance and our brokenness, and to keep reaching for something greater. It's easy to forget that mirrors do not create what they reflect, they only reveal it. Eden 9b didn't make us special, it reminded us that we already were. It didn't give life meaning. It showed us that meaning was always there, hidden in the rhythm of atoms, in the pulse of galaxies, in the shared heartbeat of creation. Every breath we take, every drop of water, every flicker of thought is a continuation of that same universal story. As Webb continues to collect data, the mirror grows clearer. The more we learn about Eden 9b, the more we see the interconnectedness of all things. The realization that another world may host life doesn't diminish Earth's uniqueness, it amplifies it. Because now we understand that our planet is part of something much larger, a network of living worlds scattered across the stars, each playing its own note in the cosmic symphony. One day, perhaps far in the future, we might find a way to send a message to Eden 9b or receive one. But maybe we don't need to. Maybe the reflection itself is the message. A silent assurance from the universe that life endures, that consciousness persists, that creation is not a one-time event, but an eternal unfolding. When you look up at the night sky now, try to imagine that somewhere on that distant planet under a different sun, there might be beings doing the same, looking up, wondering, hoping. They might not know us, but they might feel the same sense of yearning, the same curiosity that defines what it means to be alive. And in that shared longing lies the deepest reflection of all. Eden 9b shows us that life is not a miracle confined to one tiny world. It is the mirror through which the universe sees itself. We and whatever lives out there are not separate. We are expressions of the same cosmic story, written in different languages of matter and light. The mirror does not lie. It tells us that existence is abundant, that creation is generous, and that we are part of something endlessly unfolding. So, when we gaze into that mirror, may we do so with gratitude, for it shows us who we are, not rulers of the universe, but participants in its grand design. It reminds us that we are not spectators in a cold cosmos, but reflections of a living one. And perhaps, just perhaps, when we finally understand that truth, we will realize that the real discovery was never Eden 9b. It was us. When the discovery of Eden 9b reached the public, something extraordinary happened, something no scientist, no leader, and no algorithm could have predicted. For a brief, luminous moment, the entire world felt the same emotion at the same time. Awe, not fear, not rivalry, not suspicion, but awe. Across every language, every border, every belief, the same realization echoed in the collective consciousness: we are not alone. The news didn't divide the world, it united it. Eden 9b became more than a discovery. It became a shared revelation, a spark of wonder that transcended politics, religion, and nationality. Humanity, for the first time in centuries, felt like one species again. It began quietly at first. People gathered in front of televisions, in classrooms, in cafes and living rooms, staring at the holographic renderings of the distant planet. They saw a glowing blue-green sphere orbiting a golden star, a world bathed in light that had traveled for over a century to reach us. But even though it was unimaginably far away, something about it felt intimate. It felt familiar, as though, in that shimmering image, we weren't just seeing another planet, we were seeing a reflection of home. Governments that had once argued over budgets and boundaries suddenly found themselves sharing data. Space agencies, once secretive, opened their archives. Scientists in Beijing were working with engineers in Houston. Students in Nairobi were collaborating with astronomers in Berlin. There was a sense that this discovery didn't belong to any one nation. It belonged to everyone. Humanity had found something that could not be owned, could not be patented, could not be conquered. Eden 9b was beyond all that. It existed as a symbol of unity, an emblem of something purer than progress, shared wonder. In cities that were once fractured by division, people gathered under open skies for what came to be called Nights of Wonder. Parks were filled with telescopes, projectors, and music. Families, friends, and strangers stood shoulder to shoulder, looking up, talking softly about the planet that had changed everything. Children pointed at the stars with wide eyes, asking their parents if there were kids on Eden 9b looking back at them. Elders spoke of how they never thought they'd live to see such a day. And for once, the noise of human life, the politics, the rivalry, the endless competition faded into the background, replaced by something older, something sacred, the sound of collective awe. News networks from every corner of the globe began to share stories not of conflict, but of connection. A monk in Tibet and an astronaut in Florida spoke in the same interview about how the discovery reaffirmed their belief in a connected universe. Churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples opened their doors to people of all faiths to pray not for protection or victory, but for understanding. The Pope called it a moment of divine humility. Islamic scholars described it as a sign of God's endless creativity. Jewish rabbis spoke of the discovery as a mirror of the infinite. In India, Hindus saw it as a confirmation of what their ancient scriptures had long said, that the universe is filled with countless worlds, each breathing its own version of life. Even those without religion found something deeply spiritual in it. Because when you look across the immensity of space and find another world like yours, you don't need faith to feel reverence. You just need to be human. For the first time in living memory, the discovery of something greater than ourselves did not lead to fear, it led to harmony. Humanity didn't look at Eden 9b and see a threat. We saw family, we saw possibility, we saw ourselves. It was as if the planet had whispered across the void, "You are not alone, you never were." Schools began rewriting their science curriculums to include the discovery, not as a cold piece of data, but as a living story, a turning point in human history. Teachers didn't just talk about astronomy, they talked about unity, curiosity, and the responsibility that comes with knowledge. The story of Eden 9b became a lesson not just in science, but in empathy. Children who had grown up hearing only about division and difference suddenly had a new narrative, a story that said, you belong to something bigger than your country, your faith, your city. You belong to the universe. Artists, poets, and musicians responded in ways that transcended language. A global art movement bloomed with murals of twin planets, Earth and Eden, painted on walls from Sao Paulo to Seoul. Poets wrote verses about light traveling across time to deliver us this message of kinship. Composers took the spectral data from Webb's readings and turned it into sound, converting the frequency of Eden 9b's atmospheric waves into haunting, beautiful symphonies. Every note, every brushstroke, every verse seemed to carry the same quiet message: we are one species under one sky. Politicians, too, found themselves transformed, some unwillingly. For decades, they had built their careers on division. But suddenly, division didn't sell anymore. The people of the world were tired of fear. They had glimpsed something larger than all human arguments, and it had changed their priorities. Climate agreements that had stalled for years were suddenly signed. Peace talks that had been deadlocked found momentum. Leaders who spoke of unity were heard, those who spoke of isolation were ignored. Humanity, for once, wasn't looking inward, it was looking outward together. There was even a moment at the United Nations that historians now call the Quiet Hour. Delegates from 193 countries stood in silence as the latest image of Eden 9b was projected above them, a soft, swirling orb bathed in light. No speeches, no negotiations, just silence, and in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. They were no longer representatives of nations, they were representatives of Earth, but unity wasn't just political or cultural, it was emotional. The discovery of life beyond Earth tapped into something primal within the human soul, the need to belong. For centuries, people have felt small beneath the stars, insignificant in the cosmic scale. Yet now, that vastness didn't feel empty, it felt shared. We weren't tiny specks lost in an indifferent universe. We were part of a living tapestry that stretched across the stars. That realization filled people not with insignificance, but with purpose. Writers compared it to the overview effect, the shift in consciousness astronauts feel when they see Earth from space and realize that all the lines dividing humanity are imaginary. Except this time it wasn't just astronauts, it was everyone. The entire planet experienced a kind of emotional gravity shift. The perspective changed. Instead of seeing the world through the lens of scarcity, we began to see it through the lens of abundance. Not material abundance, but existential abundance. There was enough wonder for everyone. In the months that followed, a new movement began, not political, not religious, but human. People started calling themselves children of the cosmos. It wasn't an organization. It had no leaders, no borders. It was simply a mindset, a quiet rebellion against cynicism. To be a child of the cosmos meant to live with wonder, to treat others as fellow travelers in the same cosmic journey. To believe that the purpose of life wasn't domination or wealth, but understanding and creation. Social media, so often a source of division, became a space for connection. Photos of the stars filled timelines. People shared stories of how the discovery made them feel closer not only to the universe, but to one another. There was a sense that the old age of arrogance and isolation was fading, replaced by something gentler, wiser, more curious. Even the language we used began to change. Scientists and journalists stopped saying aliens and started saying life beyond Earth. The phrase intelligent life was replaced with parallel life. The subtle shift in words reflected a deeper shift in consciousness, a move from separation to belonging. And perhaps most remarkably, the discovery reshaped our understanding of ourselves. When you realize that life exists elsewhere, you start to see your own life differently. Suddenly, the petty concerns of daily existence, the arguments, the grudges, the fears, lose their weight. People began to find meaning in simple things again, in laughter, in love, in kindness. Because if the universe is alive, if life is its language, then every act of compassion becomes a translation of that cosmic message. Scientists noticed this cultural transformation too. One of the lead researchers on the Webb team said during an interview, "For the first time, I think humanity is beginning to act like a single organism, thinking, feeling, and dreaming as one." His words resonated across the world. We had spent so long searching the stars for another species to connect with, not realizing that the real miracle was the connection we found with each other in the process. In time, Eden 9b became more than a planet. It became a symbol. Artists painted it on flags, students wore its image on their clothes, and musicians wrote songs that used its name as a metaphor for hope. "See you on Eden" became a phrase people said to each other when parting, half joke, half prayer. It meant, "I believe in a future big enough for both of us." This sense of unity didn't erase our differences, but it softened them. Humanity didn't become perfect overnight. There were still wars, still greed, still conflict. But something fundamental had changed in our perception. We could no longer fully hate what we now knew was a reflection of ourselves. We could no longer see the Earth as small or life as rare. The discovery had permanently expanded our emotional horizon. And perhaps that was the true gift of Eden 9b, not proof of life, but proof of possibility. Proof that we could still feel wonder in an age of cynicism, still believe in something greater, still come together for reasons beyond survival. In a world that had grown tired, the cosmos had handed us a mirror, and in it we saw not what we feared, but what we could become. Years later, when historians look back on this era, they may not call it the age of technology or the space age. They may call it the age of awakening, the time when humanity finally began to see itself as part of a living universe. And perhaps one day, when we finally reach Eden 9b, we will find that its inhabitants went through the same journey, that they too once looked at their sky and felt that same unifying wonder. Until then, we will keep looking up. not just to find them, but to remind ourselves of what they've already given us, a reason to see each other not as rivals, but as companions on a shared voyage through the infinite. For in that moment when the light of Eden 9b reached us, the light of something far greater ignited within us too, the light of unity, the light of understanding, the light of one humanity beneath one boundless sky. The discovery of Eden 9b with its staggering 99.7% chance of life was not an ending, it was a beginning to a chapter humanity had dreamed of writing since the first spark of curiosity ignited in our ancestors' minds. The telescopic data, the light signatures, the complex molecular patterns, these were not just scientific achievements, they were the first words of a conversation between worlds. And though separated by 120 light years, the connection between Earth and Eden 9b marked the dawn of a new era, the age of interplanetary exploration, not of fiction or fantasy, but of purpose and destiny. In the months after the discovery, the world's leading space agencies came together to discuss what would happen next. There was an unspoken understanding in the air, a shared feeling that humanity had stepped onto a path it could not turn back from. The Webb telescope had opened the door, but it was only the first step. Now we had to walk through it. Teams of scientists, engineers, philosophers, and artists gathered to imagine the future. They spoke of telescopes so powerful they could read the surface of a planet from across the galaxy, of machines that could sail on beams of light, of sensors delicate enough to detect the glow of an alien city, and for once, these ideas didn't feel like science fiction, they felt inevitable. The discovery had accelerated human ambition to a level unseen since the moon landing. Eden 9b had become our cosmic destination, and the world was ready to go there, not with rockets, but with intention, with patience, and with awe. The first mission to follow up on Webb's discovery was the Habitable Worlds Observatory, a massive project combining the resources of multiple nations. It was designed not just to look at Eden 9b, but to listen to it, to study every flicker of light, every shift in its atmosphere, every signal that might whisper, "We are here." The telescope was projected to launch in the 2040s, and its construction became a symbol of planetary cooperation. Nations that had once competed now shared blueprints, scientists, and funding. Humanity had finally learned that exploring the universe was not a race, it was a shared pilgrimage. Yet the technology was only half the story. What truly mattered was what this mission represented, the transformation of curiosity into connection. For centuries, exploration had been driven by conquest, by the hunger to claim and to control, but this time was different. This time, humanity wasn't exploring to take, it was exploring to understand. The tone of space exploration had changed from dominance to reverence. We weren't just searching for life, we were preparing to meet it, but as we prepared, profound questions arose. What would we say if we found intelligent beings? How could we communicate without misunderstanding or harm? Could our words, our symbols, our actions reach across the cosmic silence without arrogance? Philosophers called it the humility test. For the first time, humanity had to consider not what it could do, but what it should do. Global committees began to form, coalitions of linguists, psychologists, ethicists, and theologians. They worked not on building rockets, but on building meaning. What does it mean to meet another form of life? How do we define intelligence without bias? How do we make first contact without repeating the mistakes of our own history? The wars, the colonization, the arrogance of believing our way is the only way. The future demanded not only new science, but new wisdom. Meanwhile, the scientific community pushed forward. Data continued to flow in from Webb and other observatories, revealing even more details about Eden 9b. Its atmosphere wasn't just similar to Earth's, it was alive with rhythm. Fluctuations in methane hinted at cyclical biological activity. Shifts in light absorption suggested oceans, possibly even continents. There were spectral patterns that some interpreted as signs of chlorophyll-like pigments, indicators of photosynthesis. It was as though the planet itself was singing, and for the first time we were listening. Public excitement reached levels unseen in modern history. Space exploration, once a niche interest, became a global obsession. Universities reported record enrollments in astronomy and astrobiology. Entire generations grew up with Eden 9b as their North Star, their symbol of purpose. The discovery had reawakened something ancient in the human heart, the urge to explore, not for survival, but for meaning. But while the world dreamed of reaching that distant planet, others turned inward, realizing that our readiness to meet life elsewhere depended on how we treated life here. Environmental movements gained unprecedented strength. Before we reach another Eden, one activist said, "We must prove we can care for this one." Humanity began to see stewardship not as an obligation, but as a privilege. The thought that life existed elsewhere didn't make Earth less special, it made it sacred. It reminded us that this small blue world was part of a cosmic network of living planets, and our responsibility was to protect the thread that connected us all. The discovery also redefined our understanding of time. We were looking at Eden 9b as it was 120 years ago. The light Webb captured had left that world before any of us were born. Whatever existed there now, it could have changed, evolved, or even vanished. That realization humbled us. It reminded us that cosmic communication is a conversation across centuries. If there were beings there and they were looking at Earth, they would be seeing our world in the early 1900s, before satellites, before global networks, before we even knew what DNA was. The thought was staggering. Two civilizations, each staring at the other's past, trying to imagine the other's present. This sense of cosmic distance deepened our empathy. Scientists began to speak of the patience of the universe, how discovery on this scale demanded a new relationship with time. We had to learn to think not in years or decades, but in epochs. Humanity, for the first time, began to plan on galactic timescales. We knew that we might never reach Eden 9b in our lifetimes, but we built for those who would. We dreamed not for ourselves, but for those who would come centuries later. That shift from immediacy to legacy was perhaps the greatest evolution of all. And yet, for all the technological plans and theoretical debates, the true transformation was emotional. Humanity's spirit changed. We began to see ourselves as part of something vast, ancient, and interconnected. The petty divisions that once consumed our attention seemed absurd against the backdrop of an inhabited cosmos. What mattered now was not who ruled what, but how we fit into the larger story of life itself. Religious leaders, scientists, and artists began to speak in similar tones for the first time. They all used the same word, oneness. The discovery of another living world didn't diminish humanity's faith, it deepened it. It suggested that creation, in whatever form one believed, was not limited to one world or one people. It was universal, infinite, ongoing. The divine, many said, had never been small. It was just waiting for us to look far enough to understand. And as that understanding grew, so did hope. For centuries we have feared extinction, whether through war, climate collapse, or cosmic catastrophe. But the knowledge that life thrives elsewhere, that it has found ways to exist even in alien conditions, gave us courage. Life, it seemed, was resilient beyond comprehension. Perhaps, even if humanity vanished someday, life would continue elsewhere. In that way, the universe itself became our continuity. We were no longer fighting for the survival of a species. We were participating in the endurance of life as a cosmic force. As the years passed, new generations were born into a world where the idea of other life was not shocking, but natural. Children grew up dreaming not of superheroes or movie stars, but of explorers who would one day reach Eden 9b. To them, the stars were not distant anymore. They were destinations, and that subtle change in imagination altered everything. Humanity's vision was no longer confined to its horizon. We had begun to think like a cosmic species. In the midst of this evolution, the scientists who had led the Webb discovery gathered once more, now older, grayer, humbled by what their work had unleashed. One of them, in a speech broadcast worldwide, said something that captured the spirit of the era. When we looked at the stars, we thought we were searching for life, but what we found was ourselves. The reflection of our own longing, our own fragility, our own courage. Eden 9b showed us that the universe is not a cold void. It is alive with meaning. Her words resonated deeply because they encapsulated what humanity had become, a species that had finally learned to see exploration not as escape, but as communion. We were no longer trying to leave Earth behind. We were learning to extend Earth's story beyond itself. The difference was everything. Soon, plans for a mission began to take shape, not to visit Eden 9b, which was still far beyond our reach, but to send a message. It would be humanity's greeting to the cosmos, a pulse of light encoded with art, science, music, and voices from around the world. The message would travel for more than a century before it reached that distant world, but that didn't matter. It wasn't about being heard, it was about speaking. For the first time, humanity spoke not to itself, but to the universe. And in that act, simple, poetic, and profound, we crossed an invisible threshold. We became what we were always meant to be, not mere observers of the cosmos, but participants in its unfolding story. The night the signal was sent, people all over the world gathered again, just as they had the night the discovery was announced. They watched as a beam of light rose from Earth into the sky, carrying within it the essence of everything we are, our music, our laughter, our mistakes, our dreams. And as that light vanished into the stars, humanity didn't feel small. For the first time, we felt infinite. Perhaps someday, far in the future, someone, or something, on Eden 9b will receive that signal. Perhaps they will decode our message and hear the songs of our oceans, the rhythm of our hearts, the language of our hope. And perhaps they will smile, realizing that across the gulf of light and time, they were never truly alone either. But even if that day never comes, even if our message drifts forever through the void, it will still mean something. Because in sending it, we affirmed the most beautiful truth of all, that to be alive is to reach outward. That curiosity is the purest form of love, that every act of exploration, every question we ask, is an act of faith in something greater than ourselves. So when future generations look back on this moment, the discovery of Eden 9b, the first planet that made us believe life is abundant, they will not remember it only as a scientific milestone. They will remember it as the moment humanity grew up, the moment we stopped asking, "Are we alone?" and started asking, "What can we become?" And perhaps that's the greatest discovery of all. Not that life exists elsewhere, but that the universe, in its infinite mystery, is alive within us too. Eden 9b may be 120 light years away, but the connection it awakened lives here, in every heart that dares to look up and wonder. Because the truth is timeless, the universe was never empty. It was always waiting for us to see it for what it truly is, a living, breathing masterpiece of which we are both the observers and the participants. And as the stars look down upon us, silent and eternal, we can finally look back at them and whisper, "We understand now."